Good to have you with us on Ed Schultz News and Commentary on this Wednesday edition. So I guess we're all supposed to think that there's some sea change that's going to take place in the House of Representatives now that Paul Ryan is allegedly reeled in the radicals to tell them that there's not going to be any deals if he's going to be Speaker of the House. I don't buy it. Let's clear the deck early this morning. This is the same Paul Ryan that called people takers. You remember the fight that we had for the 99ers when the Great Recession was taking place and people were losing their jobs and they couldn't get back into the economy for several years and their unemployment benefits ran out? And there was a big fight in Congress and the Democrats wanted to extend these unemployment benefits and there were all kinds of deals being cut. But at the end of the day, it was labeling that was taking place from the Republicans, and it was Paul Ryan who was leading the way saying America's nothing but a bunch of takers. We were in Lorain, Ohio, doing a story on the steel mill there, and one steel worker said, I've never taken anything in my life. He doesn't understand American workers, nor does he care. This is a guy who helped quarterback all of these votes in the House, along with John Boehner, to get rid of Obamacare, to steal health care away from Americans after they had already voted for it and paid for it and accepted it and used it and changed their lives. He wants to take it away. He was on the campaign trail for Mitt Romney as vice presidential candidate on the Republican side and talked about privatizing Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. So those three examples right there, are you going to tell me that Paul Ryan all of a sudden has an epiphany and he's going to change and he's going to be able to work with these radicals? No, he's one of them. He's one of them. And if Democrats think that this is going to be some kind of a sea change, that he won't lead obstruction the same way Boehner did, you know, that I'm totally off the mark, because I don't think this guy's ever going to change. He's an ideologue. He's far more of an ideologue than Boehner ever was. And I think it's going to be more of the same. Why is he saying all these things? Because he wants the power. And no one is saying that. He is perfectly positioned to grab the power of Speaker of the House and work his agenda over the long haul. That's what Ryan is about. But this is what he's telling his House colleagues.
First, we need to move from an opposition party to being a proposition party. Because we think the nation is on the wrong path, we have a duty to show the right one. Our next speaker has to be a visionary one. Second, we need to update our House rules.
Hold it right there. Hold it right there. A visionary one. He's going to come back in time and tell you that Social Security is unsustainable. He's going to come back and tell you that entitlements that we have voted on and appreciated and enjoyed and prospered from as a society have got to turn around, and we've got to privatize Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Look, I know this talk. I know how these people are, and I'll guarantee you he is setting the table to do all of this. This is about a power grab right now. Go ahead.
Second, we need to update our House rules so that everyone can be a more effective representative. This is, after all, the people's house. But we need to do this as a team. And it needs to include fixes that ensure that we do not experience constant leadership challenges and crises. Third, we as a conference should unify now and not after a divisive speaker election. And the last point is personal. I cannot and I will not give up my family time. I may not be on the road as often as previous speakers, but I pledge to try and make up for it with more time communicating our vision, our message.
Okay. Now, you know, anybody, any family man, any dad, any leader of a family can certainly understand that. The interesting word in that answer was the word team. What team? The team with the American people? Does that mean that Paul Ryan is going to be willing to work with Democrats? Or is he going to try to run them over with this majority and this gerrymandering that's taken place? And the minority will have absolutely no voice in the House. Tom Cole understands, he's the congressman from Oklahoma, and he knows that the American people aren't happy with any of this.
I think he will. The real question here is really next week. I think, look, he'll literally have 200 or more members of a 247-member conference, and I would expect, again, he'll have to go through an election process. You're not going to get it coronated around here for anything. But then next week, when we're on the floor, will everybody feel comfortable with the decision that the conference made, and then, pretty much vote for him on there? Because the Democrats certainly aren't going to and shouldn't shouldn't be required to. Obviously, they're going to have their own candidate for Speaker.
Okay, so the bottom line is he thinks that Ryan's going to make it. Harry Reid is throwing his hat in the game, saying that, he hopes Ryan gets the deal.
Paul Ryan, who I hope gets to be the next Speaker, very reasonably said last week, quote, if the United States missed a bond payment, it would shake the confidence of the world economy. Well, he appears to me to be one of the people over there that would be reasonable. I mean, look at some of the other people. I'm a Paul Ryan fan. I don't agree with him on much of what he does.
Well, it's going to be a dogfight, I think. And I don't think that Mr. Ryan is going to work with Democrats. He's the same guy. Remember that. Let's turn to Jan Schakowsky, Congresswoman from Chicago, Illinois. Congresswoman, good to have you with us.
Great to be with you, Ed. Thanks.
Is this a new Paul Ryan? Is this a new direction for the House, the way he's talking about how they got to get along? What do you think?
Here's the thing. The problem that they have with John Boehner, I think, is the same one they're going to have with Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan is anything, as you pointed out. He's certainly not a moderate. This is a guy who has some pretty dangerous ideas, particularly about so-called entitlements. He wants to turn Medicare into a voucher system. He thinks that any of the social programs are just creating a hammock that leads to dependency. Those are words that he used. But he is more of an institutionalist. That is, he is willing to have a conversation and sit down with Democrats, and that's what the Freedom Caucus really hates. These are people who don't want to compromise. So the idea of being a proposition party and a visionary leader and the ability to vacate the chair, meaning get rid of the speaker, I can't see how this really works.
Well, I don't either. And I don't see him having the personality or the leadership direction of the past to prove to us that he's going to accept a minority voice or work with Democrats to get enough votes to move the country forward. How do we know that he's not going to come up with some radical plan to take away health care from the 10 million Americans that have prospered from it from the Affordable Care Act? Because he was in that crowd. So what changes?
I think it's a given that any of the leaders, including John Boehner, said I think before he leaves, he wants to work on a repeal of Obamacare once again through reconciliation, meaning it would only take a majority of votes in the Senate to do that. So I think that's exactly where they want to go. But the question is, even though they all have pretty much the same goals, I don't think that the Freedom Caucus is going to allow any conversation about working with Democrats, about even having dialogue with Democrats. They hate the president so much. They hate the Democrats so much that they want it their way or the highway. That's
Ryan's a Wall Streeter, isn't he? I mean, he's a corporatist from the word go, and he will favor the corporations over the wage earners of this country. I don't see him doing anything for the middle class. He never even talks about the middle class.
No, we've seen his budget. We have seen the Ryan budget. We know what they do to the American people. They take us in the same direction of increasing income inequality, of harming older Americans. We've seen it. We don't have to guess where Paul Ryan is coming from. It's not pretty.
Jan Schakowsky, one question about presidential politics. Do you think Joe Biden will get in? Do you think he should?
I absolutely think he should not. I don't understand why he would. I don't understand space for Joe Biden. I think that it would anger a lot of women, including me, who thinks that the opportunity to have the first woman president of the United States would be made much harder by his getting into the race. The polling data for him is bad now.
It's getting worse. The majority of Democrats do not want him to run. And based on that, it would seem to me that it would be hard for him to run money, to raise money, because, you know, if you're a Democratic donor and Joe Biden comes to you and says, hey, I really need some cash to get this thing kicked off, you can see the donor saying, well, Joe, your own party doesn't want you to run. Why do you want me to contribute to you? How do you know you're going to win this thing?
I don't think it works for him. I'm hoping that for his own sake, for his own legacy, that he makes the decision not to run.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Congresswoman, he's Vice President of the United States. He has presidential security. If he goes on the campaign trail, he takes Air Force too. That's $55,000 an hour. Wouldn't it be extraordinarily expensive for Joe Biden to be a candidate?
Yeah, I mean, for all those reasons, I think it looks bad. I think it isn't good. And I don't think that the American people are going to, I understand there are people around him who are saying, Joe, this is your moment. This is your last chance. He thinks about Beau. But I think for every reason, even personal reasons for him, this is definitely not he has to step back.
Okay. Jan Schakowsky, always a pleasure. Great to visit. Thanks so much.
Nice to talk to you, Ed.
You bet. This is Ed Schultz, News and Commentary. We'll continue with the controversy that has erupted around Joe Biden and his story about the killing of Osama bin Laden. What is the truth? Tim Ryan, Congressman from Ohio, talks about the budget and what Ryan's all about. And John Nichols gives us some insight on exactly what this speaker would be like. Would he change? Stay with us. Lots more coming up on Ed Schultz News and Commentary. We're right back.
Hey folks, you've heard me talk about BioGreen Clean. I'm going to show you right now on my airplane just how tough this is. I want you to keep in mind, chemical-free, 100% plant-derived, biodegradable. It is the safest cleaner that you can get, and it's the most effective. Go to our website, wegoted.com, or go to biogreenclean.com. www.biogreenclean and order today.
It's time to continue our conversation about mechanical insulation. Mechanical insulation is for the piping systems in our nation's commercial and industrial facilities. Facility owners are burning up billions of dollars through the lack of mechanical insulation on these piping systems. Call the iSave team. Insulation saves America valuable energy, and this team of energy conservation specialists is shovel-ready to save you money. Visit iSaveTeam.org to have a specialist give your plant an energy audit.
We perpetuate a culture of crime all the way from Wall Street right down to the main street in our hometowns. It's worse than it has been since FDR took control of the problem and said we can't count on industry taking care of the American labor. They probably have already engaged into some type of criminal cover-up, and the law prohibits the government from even doing anything about it.
Catch America's lawyer Mike Papantonio on YouTube at youtube.com/GoLeftTV.
Subscribe to the Ed Schultz podcast today. Simply log on to iTunes, search for Ed Schultz, and click the subscribe button to have the show delivered to your preferred listening device daily, free of charge. Rate and review the podcast to tell us how we're doing. More details at wegoted.com.
Ed Schultz News and Commentary for this Wednesday. It doesn't take long to find controversy around any candidate. I mean, when you're running for president of the United States, they vet everything. But this one's front and center, and it was thrown right at the American people. The killing of bin Laden certainly was one of the biggest things that this country has seen in recent years. And the fact that President Obama during debates said that if Pakistan was not willing or unable, that we would take action and go in and get bin Laden, and that's exactly what we did. The famous picture, as you see right here, shows all the key players in the war room watching this operation unfold. And when it was all over with, there was a big discussion in this country about who was for it, who was against it, who said yes, who said no, who told the president to go. This is a montage of Joe Biden on record saying that he was more than skeptical. In fact, he told the president not to do it.
I said, we owe the man a direct answer. Mr. President, my suggestion is don't go. We have to do two more things to see if he's there. Ladies and gentlemen, I said, wait another 7 days for the following information. I wanted him to take one more day to do one more test to see if he was there.
Now, the political calculation is this. It's always good to be on the right side of the issue when something like this unfolds for the positive for the world. Well, Joe Biden was on record saying that he wasn't in favor of it. Now he's talking about running for president, but the words are a lot different right now.
So as we walked out of the room and walked upstairs, I told him my opinion, that I thought he should go, but follow his own instincts. But it would have been a mistake. Imagine if I had said in front of everyone, don't go or go, and his decision was a different decision.
Clearly a discrepancy there. The only person that's going to be able to sort this out is the President of the United States. President Obama, did Joe Biden, your vice president, in private tell you that you should say yes to this operation and go in and get Osama bin Laden? I don't know if we're ever going to get that answer during Obama's administration because he doesn't want to weed into this political dogfight that's taken place for the nomination. But this is a question because, seriously, Joe Biden may have credibility issues with a lot of people. And the majority, as I said earlier, a majority of Democrats do not want Joe to run. I hope he puts it to rest real soon and says no, as I said in commentary yesterday. Let's turn now to Ohio Congressman Tim Ryan, who sits on the Budget Committee. Congressman, good to have you with us.
How you doing, Ed?
I'm doing great. You know, you and Paul Ryan are of same physical stature. You know, you're big guys, you're tall guys, you're ex-jocks. You go face to face, you go eye to eye with this guy. Is Paul Ryan going to change who he is so the House of Representatives gets along, or is this just an opportunity for a power grab to make sure that he gets enough votes to be Speaker and talks about all this unity and what they have to do for the country? What do you make of it?
Well, I'm not sure. We're watching it unfold. I think, him at least from the reports, saying this is what I need, if I don't get it, goodbye, I think is a pretty strong move. And I think, if he can get them to them being the Freedom Caucus, if he can get the Tea Party wing to at least for a year or more to not make a motion to remove him as Speaker, at least agree to that, and he has the room to go over and get Democrats to help pass comprehensive legislation that maybe is a little more down the middle than the Tea Party legislation we've been getting. Yeah. It could be a very successful year and a half.
But the Freedom Caucus can go back behind closed doors in the cloakroom and say, look, he's saying this stuff right now because he wants to be Speaker. We know who he is. We've seen his budget. He's a guy that loves Wall Street. He's a guy that wants to privatize everything. We're going to be able to trust him. Do you think there's some Freedom Caucus conversation going on there? He wants to privatize Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, wants to cut benefits, food stamps, and unemployment benefits across the board. He's our guy. You think they're saying that?
Could be. I mean, I think he's conservative enough and has been conservative on a lot of these issues, quite frankly, that we've campaigned against him on. That I think they would agree with, but these aren't folks that are like okay with 60%. The reason the government is shut down, the reason we almost stopped paying our bills is because these guys want 100%. So if they're moderating their position, saying, hey, listen, this guy's with us 60, 70% of the time, that's going to be a huge shift in the mentality of the Tea Party. And here's the concern, too, if they say they leave Paul Ryan alone, and he's allowed to come across and get Democratic votes. The question then becomes, do they, as a Tea Party organization with Club for Growth and Ted Cruz and all of these other right-wingers, do they start going into the congressional districts, setting up primaries for the Republicans who would cross over with Paul Ryan and vote with the Democrats? Do they start to primary each other and try to get an even more conservative Congress because these guys are crossing over?
Yeah, do they want to be like coyotes and eat their own? I mean, that's really...
Well, they have been. They have been.
All right.
The question is, do they like the taste?
Yeah, that's right. Nobody does right now. Here's Ryan talking about his success.
I have shown my colleagues what I think success looks like, what I think it takes to unify and lead, and how my family commitments come first. I have left this decision in their hands. And should they agree with these requests, then I am happy and I am willing to get to work.
Okay, so his success pattern, if you pay attention to his vice presidential campaign, his success pattern, if you look at his budget, guts the middle class, or does that go too far?
No, I think you're right. I mean, the whole privatizing of Medicare, which, was pretty clear. A lot of the deep cuts to discretionary spending, to the poverty programs, to this, to that. Now, I will say this, as Democrats, if we're interested in reforming some of these programs, which we should be, I don't think we're making the dent in reducing poverty that we need to make. I don't think we're providing opportunity for poor people. I think a lot of times Democrats are just defending a system that's the status quo, and so we defend the status quo. They come in with radical changes, and it sounds appealing to the middle-of-the-road voter because they're at least trying to do something. Maybe there's a possibility that we can, without gutting spending or anything else, have some reform within these programs. Mm-hmm. Take the Medicaid program, for example. There's not any real prevention in the Medicaid program. We wait until kids in schools get diabetes, and then they come into the Medicaid program, and we take care of them. But we don't do anything about changing the culture of food or diet or exercise or anything in the school in order to reduce the burden on the Medicaid program. So I think ideas like that can be maybe something that we can work with Paul on.
Congressman Tim Ryan, solid guy from Ohio. Final question. How did Ryan play on the campaign trail in Ohio? I mean, was he a guy that could generate enthusiasm? Do you think that there's going to be a number of Republicans across the country that are going to feel, relieved that this guy is actually considering taking the job?
Well, we won Ohio, Ed. I'll leave it at that.
All right. Good. Tim, good to visit. Thanks so much. You bet. Congressman Tim Ryan from Ohio. When we come back, John Nichols talking about Ryan and what he's like when it comes to the budget. Could he change? Is he flexible? Does he really want to lead? Or is this just a smokescreen to get more power? Lots more coming up. Stay with us. This is Ed Schultz News and Commentary.
From the steel mills of Pennsylvania to the auto factories of Michigan to the modern makers movement, manufacturing makes our nation great. I'm Scott Paul, president of the Alliance for American Manufacturing. We bring business and labor together to advocate for policies that everyone can agree on. Together, we can strengthen manufacturing and create good-paying American jobs. Help us keep it made in America.
The Ed Schultz Internet broadcast is brought to you by the Ring of Fire radio show. Listen to the Ring of Fire weekends on radio stations across the country. Get more information and the news of the day at ringofireradio.com.
Communication Workers of America, great organization. Alliance for American Manufacturing, they push hard for middle-class workers in this country. Bio Green Clean and the iSave team bring you this production. Ed Schultz News and Commentary. John Nichols with us here today. John, good to have you with us. Washington correspondent of The Nation and great friend of mine who knows a lot about Paul Ryan, the chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee, who may be our next speaker. John, good to have you with us.
It's great to be with you, Ed.
Let's back up just a little bit and talk about Biden. Does Biden now have a problem with his account of bin Laden? Does this make it doubly tough for him to jump in?
Everything makes it doubly tough for Biden to jump in. Look, the fact of the matter is that if he wanted to run, and I think there's a part of him that clearly is wanting to run, he waited too long. I mean, the truth is that the argument for him to get in was that Hillary Clinton was in so much trouble that somebody from what might be described as the mainstream, the establishment of the Democratic Party, had to step up. Clinton's doing better. There's no doubt of that. Her debate performance was strong, and she's about to go before the Benghazi Committee, which is probably, amazingly enough, after all the Sturm and Drang, going to be a good day for her. And so the end result is that everything Biden does now, every statement he makes, is scrutinized in that context. And that statement as regards the bin Laden events, as well as a couple of the other things he's said recently, they make him look a little desperate. They make him look like he's sort of trying to position And it doesn't work well.
John, I think this most recent CNN ORC poll out really hurts Biden. The majority of Democrats are saying, Joe, don't jump in. How do you go raise money on that? How do you go out and say, hey, you know what? The Democrats don't want me to run, but I want to run. Will you give me some money? I mean, that just puts him in a bad spot.
It's a terrible spot.
Yeah. The other thing is that he's the vice president of the United States. He has presidential security. He goes around in Air Force Two. That's an expensive plane ride per hour. I think it's like about $55,000 to $60,000 an hour. I mean, and the government's not going to pay for his campaign. So he's got some inherent problems. Not good polling, not good finances, not good expenses. And he may be at the wrong place at the wrong time, going up against potentially the first woman president in the history of the country. And, of course, Bernie Sanders, who was pushing issues that Joe Biden has been favoring, which is a Trans-Pacific Partnership. I mean, across the board, it's a loser for Biden as I see it.
I think you're right, Ed, and I think that, I have to believe, as somebody who's covered Biden a lot and actually has a regard for him, I have to believe that his political skills are such that at the end of the day, he will decide not to make this race.
Yeah.
However, it is now hard to extract himself. What is the day on which you announce, basically, remember what he's going to be saying is not that he isn't going to make this race.
Yeah.
He's going to have to say that he's never again going to pursue the presidency.
Here's how he has to gracefully do it. Not only say he's not running, but to turn the focus and say who he's endorsing. What do you think about that?
I don't think I understand what you're saying, and that would be a really powerful way out. But here is the challenge. He said something the other day that was actually true. When he appears someplace, he essentially speaks for the president. And if Biden were to drop out, say he's not going to run, and then make an endorsement, that puts tremendous pressure on Barack Obama.
All right, we've got that soundbite. I want to play that for you. This is what Biden said about his responsibilities as VP.
It really matters. I mean, it really matters when people know you are speaking for the president and you have his confidence. And like you in foreign policy, if you notice, I will get sent to go speak to Putin or go speak to Erdogan or go speak to whomever. And it's because the Secretary of State, we've had two great Secretaries of State. But when I go, they know that I am speaking for the president. There is nothing missed between the lip and the cup, that whatever I say, the president is saying.
Okay, so that's a roundabout way of telling people I'm far more important than Hillary and I had more job responsibility than Hillary and I wasn't speaking for the president. I find that hard to believe personally, John. I think that Hillary Clinton was speaking for the president of the United States, too. I don't know what this is all about.
I totally agree. I think it was. That's what I mean about Biden's in this terrible place now where everything he says is closely scrutinized. And that one, I will tell you, Ed, I have not traveled physically with Hillary Clinton, to other countries when she was Secretary of State. But I have interviewed senators of both parties who were with her when she landed on the ground in places like Afghanistan and Iraq. And what I hear is that some of the toughest leaders in the world, when Hillary Clinton showed up, they all went silent. They wanted to hear what she was saying.
Yeah.
But I do not think that Biden is fully correct there.
Political global force, no doubt about it. All right, John Nichols, Paul Ryan. I mean, this guy is talking about trying to lay the parameters of getting along and no obstruction if he becomes Speaker of the House. I say the guy doesn't change his stripes. He's one of them. He's a Freedom Caucus guy behind closed doors. What do you think? Can this guy change? Can he run a different House than John Boehner?
Ultimately, no. He can't, because the crisis is not in the House yet. The crisis is in the Republican Party.
Yeah.
The Republican Party is profoundly divided against itself. Almost over 50%. In the new ABC poll, over 50% of Republicans polled back Donald Trump or Ben Carson, the two guys running against the establishment.
Yeah.
A majority of Republicans polled say they don't want the House Republicans to compromise on anything. And so for Paul Ryan to step into the speakership and present himself as some sort of, change agent, some sort of governing leader, a compromise person, that might go over well with some of the pundits and the Sunday morning talk shows in Washington.
Yeah.
But that's not what the base of the Republican Party is demanding.
Well,
so it's a tough place.
Yeah, he talked about team. What team's he talking about? The Republican team or the team of the people? And
I think you know the answer.
Yeah, I don't see Paul Ryan changing his stripes and saying, you know what, I'm going to work with Democrats in the House to move the country forward. I mean, that's really what the Speaker is supposed to do, to get unity on issues for the common good of the people, something Boehner hasn't done. And Ryan was a part of this team of obstruction when it came to shutting down Obama's agenda. I mean, the progressives got to wake up. This is no big victory in the House if Paul Ryan, of course he comes out and says he wants to spend time with his family. Who the heck doesn't? Of course he doesn't want any obstruction from his own party. Who doesn't? The fact is that he's much more of an ideologue than John Boehner ever was.
Totally right. And first off, let's be clear about one thing. I support the Ryan standard. I believe every worker should be able to demand defined and respected family time. Good. Glad he did it. That's fantastic. I hope he'll respect it as union members and workers across the country make that demand. But at a fundamental level here, Ed, Boehner was, yes, less ideological than Ryan, and Boehner occasionally tried to do some of what Ryan says he's going to do. And what happened? He was shot down by his own caucus.
Yeah.
And the one final thing I'd put in the mix on Ryan that people should remember, this is a rare moment here. We have a guy who wants to step into the speakership of the House, puts him second in the line of succession to the presidency, incredibly important position, who has been rejected by the American people to be first in the line of succession.
That's true. John Nichols, Washington correspondent of The Nation. Always a pleasure. Great to visit. Thanks, John. We'll do it again.
Thanks, Ed.
Communication Workers of America, Alliance for American Manufacturing, BioGreen Clean, and the iSave team bring you this production. And what the hell brought us Jim Webb? This is ego. This was an ego trip. Jim Webb did very little in the United States Senate, spent very little time in the United States Senate. He had no business being on that stage last week. The debate criteria is loose, to say the least. And for Jim Webb to step out is doing the Democrats a favor. Here's his announcement yesterday.
I know I'm going to hear this, so let me be the first to say it. I fully accept that my views on many issues are not compatible with the power structure and the nominating base of the Democratic Party. That party is filled with millions of dedicated, hard-working Americans, but its hierarchy is not comfortable with many of the policies that I have laid forth, and frankly, I'm not that comfortable with many of theirs.
Well,
for this reason, I'm withdrawing from any consideration of being the Democratic Party's nominee for the presidency.
Oh, stop trying to sound like a purist, Mr. Webb. The fact of the matter is, you were polling less than whale shit. I mean, come on. You didn't even have 2%. And, okay, so his views are different. Well, why did you run? It's an ego trip. He knew he wasn't going to win. He wanted that stage. Here's more.
This does not reduce in any way my concerns or the challenges facing our country, my belief that I can provide the best leadership in order to meet these challenges, or my intentions to remain fully engaged in the debates that are facing us. How I remain as a voice will depend on what kind of support I'm shown in the coming weeks as I meet with people from all sides of America's political landscape, and I intend to do that.
Okay, so in other words, he may run as an independent, and he will not be a Ralph Nader, so to speak. Jim Webb will not poll strong enough nationally to make an impact on who's going to be the next president of the United States. It's ego across the board. It's arrogance across the board. And did he just find out these positions of the DNC and the Democratic Party and the progressive platform to all of a sudden step up and say, hey, I'm different from them, so I'm stepping out? No, he's stepping out because nobody's supporting him. He doesn't have any money. Wake up. It's reality. This is Ed Schultz News and Commentary. We're back tomorrow.